Up next, we're going to talk to a GPS manufacturer. And now on your screen is Jim Kirkland, who is Vice President and General Counsel of Trimble Navigation. He is also a founding member of the Coalition to Save Our GPS. He joins the communicators from Mountain View, California. First off, Mr. Kirkland, what is Trimble Navigation and what is the Coalition to Save Our GPS?
Sure, Peter. Trimble Navigation is the leading manufacturer of GPS equipment for commercial and industrial use. So we focus on high-end industrial applications like agriculture, construction, survey, you name it. The Coalition to Save Our GPS was founded after an initial FCC decision last January granted a waiver to LightSqaured to proceed with its build-out of its network. And our mission is to educate policymakers on the GPS industry and the implications of that proposal, and we've been very active on that.
Jim Kirkland, last week on the Communicators we talked with Sanjeev Ahuja, the chairman and CEO of LightSqaured, and essentially what he told us was he understood the concerns, and what they have done is they have moved their spectrum usage as far away as possible within their spectrum from GPS units to mitigate the danger.
Sure. So, the issue here is that the technical evidence so far in front of the FCC still shows interference even from these modified plans. And that interference affects things like planes trying to land safely, managing logistics and training our troops stateside, farmers using precision agriculture to more efficiently manage their farms. And the GPS industry is committed to following through that process and trying to figure out if there's a technical solution, but so far no technical solution has been proven to the satisfaction of the FCC.
So is it the technology itself that troubles you, or where the spectrum is located, or what?
So the interference issues can arise from a couple things. One way you manage interference is by geographic separation. So, for example, you don't have two TV stations operating on the same frequency in the same market. They are separated by geographic area, and that helps manage interference. The other way you deal with interference is by keeping dissimilar uses pretty far apart. So right now, all the wireless networks that operate at high power like LightSqaured is proposing to do are very much further away from the GPS band than where LightSqaured is proposing to use some satellite spectrum to provide terrestrial. So it's really a very difficult interference and engineering problem because you have no geographic separation. A GPS receiver could be right next door to a LightSqaured broadcasting tower, and you have no separation in the frequency band. So these transmissions are extremely close to the GPS band, and a combination of those two things presents very serious interference, and it also makes it a very difficult engineering problem to solve.
Is it not solvable in your view?
So there's been progress made through some of the proposals. LightSqaured has changed the proposal multiple times over the last 6 or 7 months, and as they change the proposal to move further away in the spectrum band and also decrease their power, they reduce the level of interference, but no one's been able to show or conclude yet that they eliminate it for critical uses like aviation, national security, precision agriculture. And that's what the FCC has an ongoing study process to determine. The GPS industry is fully participating in that study process, and we're committed to working through the process and seeing if there is a solution. That solution really needs to be very strongly demonstrated, however, before you take risks on things like aviation safety.
Now, Mr. Kirkland, there have been some issues raised whether or not the FCC and the NTIA, NOAA, et cetera, are fully vetting LightSqaured as they should. Do you have those same concerns?
Not currently. I think, the FCC and the NTIA both were unified in the last couple of weeks saying there will be more studies to determine this. And the right answer here is to complete that process and see, if there are in fact solutions that are proven to work. So far, the technical evidence doesn't support that, but we're willing to keep working on that.
Jim Kirkland, last week in our interview with Sanjeev Ahuja of LightSqaured, he talked about the length of the process. And here's what he had to say, and I'd like to get your response.
Since 2001, 2002, 2003, 2005, some of these commercial device manufacturers, all of them have been aware that there is going to be a terrestrial network in this spectrum. If I'm buying a product that the manufacturer of the product, if I look at it my personal vantage point, manufacturer of the product knew very well that there's a potential network coming in the neighborhood of that because it's been allocated, it has been allowed. FCC has specifically specified the specifications of how that network would look like. I would make sure the devices that I make work. And actually, Cecilia, 400+ million of those devices work fine.
Jim Kirkland.
So there's a lot packed in there. I think I'll start with what he said last, and that is he says that 400 million devices work fine. That's in fact what the FCC and NTIA just said a couple weeks ago has not yet been proven and requires more study. So I think that remains to be seen. I think as far as what the FCC approved in the past, if you go back and look at the orders, the spectrum they're proposing to use is mobile satellite spectrum. So it was allocated to allow transmissions from a satellite for mobile communications purposes. And in 2001 and 2003, what the FCC allowed was what they called ancillary terrestrial service. And the point of all of that was to fill in holes in the satellite footprint. So in urban areas, there are what we call urban canyons where the satellite signals might be blocked by tall buildings. And the FCC said, well, in order to improve the mobile satellite service, we're going to allow them to build what they called fill-in transmitters on the ground to help supplement the satellite service. And that was all very clear, and the GPS industry had a very good working relationship with LightSqaured's predecessors. This is a new management team and new owners. And so long as everyone understood that that's what the terrestrial operations were for, the GPS industry, the government agencies, everyone was fine. I think what's happened now in November 2010 is LightSqaured came forward and said, we want to provide terrestrial-only broadband service, and we want to build a nationwide broadband network with 40,000 high-powered transmitters throughout the U.S. And that's definitely not what the Commission authorized in 2001-2003. So of course GPS manufacturers were not going to design their products contemplating something that simply wasn't authorized. And I think that's a key point, because once you understand what the FCC authorized and what the differences are, you also see where the interference problem comes from, because it's much more geographically ubiquitous, much higher power, basically trying to cover 92% of the population.
So finally, Jim Kirkland, do you think LightSqaured's concept needs to be junked?
Not at all. I think what we need to do is to demonstrate what power levels they can operate at, what spectrum they can operate at, and it may be that the limits on that on their proposal need to be much stricter than what they've offered. And I think that's been a lot of the issue so far, is how can they operate without causing interference to GPS? And if that's proven, then I think everyone in the government and the GPS industry will be happy to cooperate. So far, it hasn't been proven.
Jim Kirkland is the Vice President and General Counsel of Trimble Navigation, founding member of the Coalition to Save Our GPS. SaveOurGPS.org is the website. Thank you, Mr. Kirkland. Up next, a political discussion about the issues surrounding LightSqaured.